Welcome to Altar of the Demo Gods. If you're wondering what advice from two experienced sales engineers sounds like, it's a little like this.
Welcome to the first Altar of the Demo Gods podcast. My name's Keith Wilson, and I'm joined by my good friend here, John Morton. John, why don't you say hi to the folks?
It's good to be back, everybody. Hey,
Yeah, we've done the podcast thing before, but that was a different topic. That's when we talked about cybersecurity. The topic of this podcast, though, is something else that John and I hold very near and dear to our hearts, and that's sales engineering. And this whole podcast is based not on security this time, because we both worked in the cybersecurity industry for so long, but on sales engineers, right? There's a couple podcasts out there for sales engineers, but we feel like we had a voice, that we had something to say that could be added to what's out there. At least, for me, I want to explore more about other sales engineering roles, right? Because I've been so focused on cybersecurity. Do you have any personal goals that you want to get out of this podcast?
Yeah, I'm along the same lines, Keith. I'm not trying to say that I've been jaded by cybersecurity, although listeners of our previous podcasts would, probably pick up on that a little bit. It is worth exploring, at least, the technical aspect of selling in other realms of what we're doing. So personally, for me, exploring these new places can help a lot of our listeners, maybe get somewhere they never thought they could be, where cybersecurity is so gate checked. I don't know what the proper term is there, but other aspects of tech selling is absolutely worth exploring.
So, you're talking about gatekeeping and cybersecurity, and I've heard that come up a lot too. Are you saying that there's other avenues that people should be exploring when it comes to being a sales engineer?
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Outside of cybersecurity.
Absolutely, man. I saw a job offering the other day for someone selling what was it? Valves for water systems. Had absolutely nothing to do with even software. It was actually technical sales, but sales engineering.
Yeah, that's something we often don't think about, is sales engineering doesn't just apply to software, right? Or hardware, or even tech, right? Like you said, water valves. So there's different industrial systems and things like that are very technical, right? Most of them require a degree in mechanical engineering, something like that, right? Luckily, our career as a sales engineer, I use the term engineer loosely, doesn't require an engineering degree. In some cases, it doesn't require a degree at all.
You know what I just thought of, dude? Honestly, and it was a beautiful thought. You remember Keep My Wife's Name Out Your Mouth, Will Smith? What was the name of that movie, right? The movie where he's in San Francisco, he's sleeping in the bathroom. The Pursuit of Happiness. Similar thing. The guy's selling bone density machines to doctors directly. To me, that's technical sales. He has to have enough technical acumen to sell these bone density machines, combined with the ability to do some, sales engineering. So it's like that hybrid between engineering and sales, where that you remember that movie? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's that rags to riches story, right? Where he becomes I forget who it was based on. But yeah, he was selling a medically technical product.
Right.
Yeah, my girlfriend is a nurse, and she's talked about how pharmaceutical companies have nurses that almost work like sales engineers, that work with their sales reps, right? And there's a ton of money. There's no secret. There's a ton of money in pharmaceutical sales, right? So if you have that medical knowledge, that technical medical knowledge, and you're paired up with a salesperson, they don't call you a sales engineer though, because you actually have a degree, right?
Right.
You're generally a registered nurse, so they're going to call you a nurse or whatever. Or even a lot of their sales reps are registered nurses. Yeah. So it's something that maybe it's just our bubble, right, of people, because everybody we know works in software sales. So maybe we, because we've never had the discussion before amongst us around like different types of sales engineers that exist out in the world. So it's interesting to think about it from that point of view. And I'm hoping that we attract like that whole new audience to this. I'm hoping that we can stay general enough, even more general than just tech, that we can have, maybe you and I could learn some things.
Thanks for bringing me back. That'd be because I'm about 2 fingers deep into a glass of whiskey, and you asked, what do I want to get out of this? My goal for the podcast would be to cover both aspects of both sales and engineering, right? So there, to your point, no matter what discipline you come from, there's always some aspect of sales doctrine that can help you be successful in what you do. The hardest, easy job most folks will ever have will be in sales, but combining that with the tech aspect of it, what are other people doing in the tech world that maybe we're not used to? We've lived so long in cybersecurity software, it's all we've known. Imagine what else is out there, right?
I know. And I mean, also, is there OTE better, right? So maybe, I just triggered saying OTE. Maybe that's another goal of the podcast too, is we can teach some of the people that are newer to becoming a sales engineer. We can become a resource for them to learn from, because I don't know about you, but coming into being a sales engineer, there wasn't a podcast. I think like there was Great Demo, which was a pretty good book that was out there that helped. There wasn't too much guidance other than trial and error and watching other SEs. Yes. And as I've gotten older, and more experienced in my career, is what I've noticed is a lot of SEs aren't necessarily good. So if you're brand new, you don't know any better. So do you want to model that bad behavior? And I'm not saying that we're perfect. I'm not saying that we have all the answers. Right. I'm saying that we have some experience, and we're being transparent about it, right? Because we're not just broadcasting to just the newbie. We're broadcasting to everybody. So if we're, if we're not accurate in what we're saying, they can call us out on it.
To that exact effect. I'm pretty sure if we asked any high school student today if they could give me a brief description of what a gynecologist does, 99% sure they're going to wing it. But if we ask them what's a sales engineer, even in college, right? You can take it to any level of academia. Sales engineer is not a well-defined discipline. So to that exact effect, hopefully we can educate some folks.
I didn't know it was a possibility.
Yeah, neither did I. That's the kind of the goal of what we're doing, I think. Keith, is focusing on that tech sales, right? Everybody, you got to sell something, right? You got to drive revenue, KPIs other than Fed, state, local. But even then, they're being sold to you. Combine that with tech. Love it.
Are you saying that we're being evangelists for evangelists?
Hey, I love it.
That's one of my favorite titles for a sales engineer, is evangelist or tech evangelist or software evangelist or whatever, some sort of evangelist. And it's like, oh no, you talk to him a bit more, you're like, oh, you're a sales engineer.
Yes.
So let's talk about some of the names that sales engineering goes by, because in general we just call it SEs, right? Sales engineers. But it also goes by systems engineer, technical sales specialist, tech evangelist,
solutions engineer, solutions architect.
Solutions, yes, yeah. And generally, they're all the same thing, just a little different.
I think so, yeah. Maybe that's a good place to start. And we kind of highlighted it, and I skipped over it a little, but covering acronyms like OTE, POC, things like that, all relate back to what is the goal to me of a sales engineer. I'll wing it. Keith will wing it, and then we'll give a written definition that we found about what a sales engineer is. So to me, a sales engineer, by any other name, whether it's solutions architect, they align to sales in an organization. Now, the goal, for the most part, to me, of sales of any organization is to drive revenue. There are metrics by which, companies are measured, and normally that includes sales. Whatever you're selling, whether it's water valves or whether it's software, there's a metric by which how much did we transact in selling. Sales engineers, to me, align to sales, and they align more on the tech side. Can you explain the technical details of whatever it is we're selling to drive that sales quota and goal, right? $1 million quota for the year. Sales engineers help us get there. What do you got there, Keith?
Let's frame it this way. You need to write a job description. You're getting ready to hire an SE, which you do now. You're in leadership now, which that's a whole other thing that we'll get into. So you're getting ready to hire an SE. You're writing a job description. You want to describe this skill set. What are some of the things that you would describe? So let me give you my first one that I wrote down. Wasn't even technical knowledge of what you're selling, which is exactly what you were just talking about. That was actually the third one that I put on there, but it's still important. The first one that I wrote down when I was prepping for the show was presentation skills, both creating and delivering. Right? I mean, the name of this podcast is Altar of the Demo Gods, because at least we work in tech. I don't know how this works in other fields, but I'd imagine there's some sort of demonstration that's given in a lot of these other things as well. One of the biggest things that we do is we give demos of products. We also have to present slideshows or just get up and speak, right? Being able to present in front of a room full of people. And you have to, in general, you'll get fed a lot of company line information, but then you got to make it your own, and you got to be able to adjust for that audience, right, on the fly. So you have to be good at both creating and delivering presentations. What are some of the other things that you would think of, or that you do think of when you're getting ready to hire?
Yeah, I'm thinking, this is on the fly thinking right now for all of our listeners. Me and Keith didn't talk about this beforehand, but I'm thinking we need to do a Sesame Street style acronym of the day. And the acronym...
Okay. What's
the acronym?
Can we do it Pee Wee Herman style?
Yeah. If it ever comes up in
or whatever they would do, right?
The Pee Wee Herman, everyone goes crazy if they hear it. It's a combination of Sesame Street.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think the Sesame Street acronym of the day is OKR, right? So what are OKRs, right? So OKRs are normally OKIs. Objectives, key results, and initiatives. That's what I care about.
Okay.
So to your point, the objective, this is the sales revenue. You should attain $2 million in quota. What are the key results? How are we measuring how we got there? And then the initiatives, how did we get there? So to your point of presentation, 100% aligned with that, but also the fact that you understand you have a quota, you're working towards that quota. Are you working with your team to attain that quota? Was that too roundabout, Keith? Me going a little crazy on the, OKIs or OKRs, however you want to put them, to get us to that objective?
Okay, you explained it to me like an adult. I want you to explain it to me like I'm...
All right, 10-year-old. If you want to have time outside, I'm going to need you to clean up your room.
Okay.
Simple as that. Put all your toys in the toy bin.
Okay.
And you have obtained objective number 1. Now, how are you going to clean those toys up?
Okay.
Right? You just go run around and pick them all up. You got a strategy there? Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do this exactly. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
So going back to the description, then you're looking for somebody that can be self-driven, right? These are my goals. Yep. And then they can figure out how to achieve those goals.
I'm going to incentivize you on those goals, though, because the reward is outside time.
Sure.
But yes.
Sure. Okay. And if we bring that back to the adult, that outside time is your paycheck, your commission, right?
Yep. That other acronym off to use Sesame Street OTE. But yes.
We'll save OT for another time. For today, it's okay. What did we say it was? Okay.
OKR.
Results. OKR.
Results.
Okay.
Initiatives.
What about networking? Not like technical networking, but person-to-person networking.
Oh, that's so yeah, when I think about a sales engineer, all right, This will be another shocker for our listeners. Amongst leadership in sales, the acronym SE is well understood, sales engineer. Now, the way we describe that, though, sometimes is, are they a big E? Or are they a big S? What that means is, are you more of a sales type of person? Meaning, to Keith's point, I can send you in a happy hour, you're going to have a few drinks, and by the end of the night, you're going to have a few phone numbers of prospects. Or are you big E? You know how to write code. You know the ins and outs of Linux software. You can reverse engineer malware all day. The balance of an SE is the most beautiful thing. Balancing both big S, big E.
And knowing when to use the skills, right? When to turn on the sales skills, and then when to put on your engineering hat, right?
So hopefully that answered that question there.
Well, it brings up a good point too, because something else I was thinking about is like how the role has changed over time since I started. So, we jumped right into this conversation. We didn't get to introduce ourselves, give our backgrounds, right? Most of these people have no idea who we are. But so I guess now's a good chance for me. Let me give my background, and that'll set me up for the point I was about to make. So I am currently not a sales engineer. I work I run a cybersecurity education program for my employer. And that's a whole thing that started during the pandemic. And I've been doing that for about the last 3-ish years. But before that, I have about 7 to 10-ish. I didn't sit down to look at my resume, so I don't remember the exact timeline, but about 7 to 10 years experience as a sales engineer. And why I think that gives me a unique outlook that I can bring to the audience for this show is I have that sales engineer background, and I'm a little rusty. But when John introduces himself and his background here in a second, you're going to understand why he's the perfect counterweight to me on this. And the skills that I have picked up in the last several years, being an educator, creating courses, is how to ask questions, how to teach people, how to get a good explanation, right? Because sometimes as subject matter experts in whatever we're good at, we forget where we were when we first started. You and I have already come out of the gate swinging, just throwing letters everywhere, right? It's alphabet soup up in here. We're talking SEs, OKRs, OKIs, OTE, out of office, all of this stuff. And there's people that are listening to this going, you lost me at commission, right? So I think my background as an educator is going to help me ask John, who's the true subject matter expert of this podcast, the right questions to help you. With that being said, this all that was to go back to this point of how has this role changed over time since you first became an SE over time. And I will say, before I was an SE, I worked in support, which I think is a great transition. I've seen plenty of support engineers turn out to be fantastic sales engineers. Anyway, for me, I think the role has become more sales focused over time. I was probably a 30-70 mix of sales being 30, engineering being 70 when I first started. When I was no longer a sales engineer and I moved on to education, it was closer to a 60-40 mix, with 60% being sales and 40% being the engineering. That's anecdotal evidence, and even just asking you is still anecdotal evidence. Has that been your experience as well?
I'm gonna bring it back to Sesame Street level, because that's how I think, Keith. I'm gonna answer your question. But first, I'm going to tell you something that happened to me today. All right. So this is the quote for the net of anybody listening in to me and Keith for the very first time. And they're trying to figure out what we're talking about with technical sales. I had a new sales rep I had never met, before today, tell me, John, you are really good at explaining things simply. I think that's the net of what we really do in technical sales and sales engineering. If, for example, use case everybody can relate to, he joined this week. He joined on Monday. It's Tuesday or Wednesday now. And he told me, John, I'm a little overwhelmed. And I said, look, the best way to look at it is think about where you're at and think about where you want to be. All that is explaining things simply based on the situation. Now, what we do in sales engineering is taking that a step further and way more technical acumen, technical detail. But for me, what I've noticed a lot about the modern age is that the tech aspects of things are getting a whole lot easier with concepts like artificial intelligence, right? A lot of the more technical details are being trimmed down to more simplified things as time goes on. And in the beginning, to your point, it was more of a uneven balance of more tech or more sales. But now I really feel like there is a balance between sales and engineering. And that is based on my experience. To Keith's point, before I was a practitioner, right? I worked for the U.S. Navy, did a lot of stuff for the federal government, worked in finance, and then I came to the software vendor side. And the things I've learned over time are just simple facts of communicating simple facts. If you can do that, you can do this well, technical sales. Take something what people may think is complex, like the cloud. Old man yells at cloud. Abe Simpson. Explain that simply, you'll go far.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way to summarize it and explain it simply, right? Is your job is to take a lot of technical information, figure out what's relevant, and explain it simply to the customer. So there may be a lot of people listening to this podcast too because they were looking for a sales podcast, right? And they're new to sales, they're listening to whatever it was, and they're listening to this going, okay, why do you even need a technical person? Like, when I get on a sales call, I'm closing that thing right then and there. Like my girlfriend's brother is a sales works in sales for Tony Robbins, right? And I was talking to him about this the other day where, like, I told him, our sales cycles, like a good sales cycle would be considered 2 to 3 months, maybe even a month, right? Or in some that's security software, higher end security software. But, maybe some products it's even shorter, but for him, he's closing when he's on that call.
That's amazing.
Right? So a lot of salespeople are probably wondering, like, why is this needed? And it's because business to business sales of technical products aren't the same as a lot of other type of sales. Like, the products are complex, and whether we're talking about medical, whether we're talking about cybersecurity, whether we're talking about some sort of machinery, right? It's not the products are complex. You're selling a complex system that somebody is also going to spend a lot of money on. Generally, the products are much more expensive, right? And the sales cycles are longer. Like I said to you, a good software sales cycle, like if you closed in 3 months, that's pretty good, right?
That's amazing. That's in enterprise sales, right?
Yeah.
So to your point.
Oh, enterprise sales can be a year, 2 years sometimes.
24 months.
Yeah.
So to that exact point, I hope everybody listening can appreciate, the balance between both. Where's the balance between sales discipline and what you can learn from tried and true methods to the technical aspects of being technical where you need to be, right? And that's the goal for me. Bringing it back again, Keith. What's my goal for this podcast? People who are listening to tune in and say, man, I really picked up on something I didn't know. I'm a coachable and I'm a curious person. And these guys are dropping down some knowledge based on their experience that's relevant. That's the net of it, man.
So we're about to wrap up here. But before we do that, you told people about, briefly, really quick, you told us how you got into sales engineering and, a little bit about that. What do you do now?
I am a field chief technology officer for a cybersecurity vendor. We sell software. We're a startup. And basically what that means is I bridge the gap between sales, engineering, and product as a customer evangelist. So that brings it back to Keith's point about evangelist this, evangelist that. That's exactly what I do in my current role.
Yeah, and I think we're going to save it for a later episode where we're really going to dive in, because that field CTO thing is something that just popped up in the last few years. It was around when I was a sales engineer, but it's still a newer thing, and I think that one obviously is going to be applying mostly again to.
Yeah, I think as we progress
But
a
it's-
podcast too, we can talk about growth of an SE. There are different levels of SE. There are channel SEs, field CTO, enterprise. That's something we can cover at a later date. So technical sales growth. I know a lot of people ask me about that. What's my career path look like? So excellent point, Keith.
Well, and you and I have a lot of friends that are also sales engineers and in all sorts of different positions of sales engineers, although most of them work in security, but they're all in different positions. And I think they're all going to make great guests on this show when we get them on. So it'll be nice that we have all those other aspects. So I want to thank all of our listeners for listening to our first episode. I hope you tune in next week. Tune in. That makes me sound so old. Tune into the radio.
Tune in.
No, subscribe, right? That's what the kids do. They subscribe to podcasts. So subscribe to our podcast. Give us a good ratings on iTunes because that helps boost us. If you've got questions or are interested in being a guest of the show, you can email us at demogodspod@gmail.com. Or for more information, you can always visit our website, demogodspod.com. I'm Keith Wilson, and it's been great talking to you guys again. Hope to see you next week. John?
Yeah, thanks everybody. I hope you tune in because there's a lot more adventure to be had.
Yeah, it's going to be great. We're going to have, the Pee Wee Herman crazy acronym of the week. And we're going to bring back a bit. I don't know if bit's the right word. We're going to bring back a segment from our last podcast that was so much fun called Plugs and Apologies. So we'll be bringing that
Speaking of which, I got
podcast as well or future ones.
Jefferson, but we'll leave that for a later date.
We'll have to get into that one later. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.